أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My beloved brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue our series about the revival, the Islamic spirit, and we're looking at the low points in the ummah and the different catastrophes that we encountered. What caused them, but how did we come out of it? Last night we looked at the first fitna, and without a doubt one of the biggest problems of our ummah today is what we saw at the end of the age of the caliphate, the rightly guided caliphate, is disunity. Even the best of people will have different opinions, and even though everyone has a portion of the truth, everybody has some valid points, legitimate arguments, valid daleel and evidences. While we fight and argue, the ummah burns. While we fight and argue about our positions, people are dying. And that is what Sayyidina Hassan radiallahu anh understood. And he said, I will rather put down my claim, my opinion. I will make my opinion second in the favor of someone else for the purpose of unity. And with that, with unity, came once again the revival of the ummah. The ummah became strong once again. It wasn't as it was, as the Nabi Sallam had predicted. He says to the Sahaba, after the age of the rightly guided caliphs ends, it will rebuild itself again, but it won't be as it was. There will now be a kingship, a dynasty. And some of those kings will be good, some will be bad, some will be the ugly. And we now see the rise of the Umayyad, a family who would dominate Islam's political landscape for about 100 years. And no group of khulafa, no group of leaders within the history of Islam from the time of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam until the last Khalifa that was deposed 100 years ago enjoyed absolute power like the Umayyad caliphs. And with that power, with that level of strength, wealth, comes a different kind of challenge. And I ask myself, I ask you, if tomorrow you got an email and said you are now the CEO of the company, no one is going to hold you accountable, or you are the owner of the company, there is no checks and balances for you, how would you and I operate? When we have complete authority and autonomy to do as we want, when the law doesn't apply to us, what would happen? Now the Umayyad Caliphate, just some history here. After Muawiyah becomes the Khalifa, there will be further turmoil and tension after him with Yazid and Karbala and Imam Hussein. Ultimately, the Umayyads will regain control. And when they take control a second time, they will take it in such an absolute, ruthless, very systematic, from a political perspective, very strategic. They will take complete control. And the man who really establishes the Umayyad dynasty a second time, a man by the name of Abdul Malik. It's interesting. His name, 4 of his sons will become Khalifa. He is the Khalifa for 20 years, and 4 of his sons will be Khalifas, one after the other, without any dispute, without any challenge. The father of caliphs. And his name, subhanAllah, is Abdul Malik, the slave of the king. As Allah had decreed. Allah had decreed the man who would be known as really the king of kings. He would be the slave of the ultimate king. Nonetheless, Abdul Malik Ibn Marwan, rahimullah, may Allah have mercy on him, he had taken control of the Umayyad family and then re-established its dynasty, and he appointed his family members as governors throughout the different regions of Islam, and they were quite prolific, they were quite successful. He had many generals under him who kept down all the opposition, and with that, Islam from a political perspective expanded. It was under the reign of his son Al-Walid that Islam was really at its zenith from a political point of view, and the Umayyads had reached the absolute pinnacle. Al-Walid, the son of Abdul Malik, imagine, it is in Ramadan. He gets a report that Tariq bin Ziyad has conquered Spain and Portugal. He receives the same year a report that we have conquered Pakistan and India. The same year, he receives from another general, Qutayba, we have entered China. And this man's control of the authority wasn't just nominal. He would write a letter, and the general in Spain would abdicate his post and come back to Damascus even though he knew he was going to be imprisoned. Many of the generals, when they became too powerful, too successful, the Khalifa would say, you are under arrest, come. And the general would leave his troops and he will go back to Damascus. Absolute power, absolute authority. This Al-Walid, may Allah have mercy on him, he's the man that builds, even Abdul Malik, built the Dome of the Rock that you see, this golden dome in Damascus, in Palestine. This was their mosque in Jerusalem. And they built the grand mosque of Damascus. The mosque which the Nabi prophesied Nabi Isa will descend. It is this grand mosque of Damascus that the Umayyads have built. So they have a great legacy. They started minting coins for the first time. We as a ummah had our own coins. We weren't using Roman or Persians. It was under these caliphs. But of course, with this absolute power and control came corruption, came excesses, palaces. The Baytul Mal became a personal bank account for the Umayyad family. Positions, it wasn't even like nepotism, corruption. It was known. You could not be a governor or any person of standing if you weren't from the Umayyad family. They would determine the entire governance of the caliphate. Now, people lost faith in their government. Islam, people no longer looked at the rulers as people that they could aspire. Even though he carried the title Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would be the man who would still perform the Hajj on behalf of the Muslimin. But the Muslims had complete loss of faith in the Umayyad dynasty. They simply followed out of fear, and the ulama had remained silent and stood away. And this continued. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bring the first mujaddid. Now, I mentioned this in the first lecture that the Nabi says that with every 100 years, at the turn of the century, Allah would send a person who would revive the spirit of Islam. And by unanimous consent, this man, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, is the first mujaddid of our ummah. We don't count the first century because, of course, Nabi Sallallahu is the son of that century. But after the century, after the Nabi Sallallahu, there are a few candidates. Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, we'll talk about, inshallah, in a few days. He has a powerful claim of being the first mujaddid. But with unanimous consent, everyone agrees that this man, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, was the first mujaddid of our age. Who is this man? So his name is Umar, the son of Abdul Aziz, the son of Marwan. So Abdul Aziz is the brother of Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik, this great king, he had a younger brother, Abdul Aziz. So this is the Khalifa's brother. His nephew is Umar. And Umar, our person we talk about, Umar lived a kind of schizophrenic lifestyle. He had his upbringing was a bit weird. Because while his father was an Umayyad, a governor, a prince, the brother of the Khalifa, was enjoying all the luxuries and excesses of the Umayyads. He was stationed in Medina, and for some reason, when Abdul Aziz was young, he had an infatuation. He wanted to marry a girl from the family of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, Sayyidina Umar's family. Al-Khattab, Sayyidina Umar. And Sayyidina Umar's family were very strict, and they said, no, we want nothing to do with you Umayyads. You're not worthy of our family. You people are all corrupt and politics and dirty money. We can't trust you. You can't marry any of our daughters. But he insisted, and he was slightly better than the rest of the Umayyads. And so the family relented, and they allowed Abdul Aziz to marry Layla, the granddaughter of Sayyidina Umar. The granddaughter of Sayyidina Umar. Even this girl Layla has an interesting story. How did she come about? Sayyidina Umar, when he was the Khalifa, many decades before that, he had a policy of he would walk the streets at night to see the road is not right, if people are complaining. And he came past a house and he heard a mom and a daughter talking. They were people who sold milk. And the daughter said, Mom, do you know you're not allowed to mix the milk with water to make it look more? This is the rule. Sayyidina Umar advises not to do it. So she said, but Umar is not here to see us. So Umar heard this. And the daughter said, but what about the Lord of Umar? He will see us. So Sayyidina Umar marked this house. And he went, not to arrest the mom, he brought his son Asim. He said, this is a girl here, you marry this girl. This girl is a girl of taqwa, you marry her. So Asim, the son of Sayyidina Umar, married this girl Layla. Asim married this girl, the lady who sold the milk, and they had a daughter called Layla. Right, so this is the Layla. And now this Layla marries the Umayyad Abdul Aziz. And they have a son, Umar. So on the one side, he has a Khalifa grandfather, Sayyidina Umar, who was, of course, Sayyidina Umar. On his dad's side, he has Abdul Malik, who was this Umayyad Khalifa. And so he grows up in between these sort of worlds. He grows up in Medina, and with his mom's side of the family, he encounters Sahaba, and he is encouraged to learn the Quran, he's encouraged to study. In the summer holidays, he would go to Damascus, and he would party with his cousins, and he would wear the most expensive clothes. He says about himself, I was a young man like the rest of the Umayyads. When I wore a garment, and people saw me, I felt that garment was used. I couldn't wear it again. And I wore the best of things, and I took from the treasury as I wanted. It was my right as an Umayyad. But at the same time, I had my shuyukh, my sheikhs, who advised me and encouraged me. They taught me the Quran, and I became hafiz. And so he grows up like this. And he had beautiful akhlaq. One thing that people mention about him, even with his excesses, extravagance as a young man, he was always respectful and kind and loving in that way. His father, Abdul Aziz, becomes the governor of North Africa. And so Abdul Aziz relocates, and he leaves Umar in Medina. Young man in Medina, and he rather trusts Umar, stay with your mom's side of the family rather than my side of the family. And so he grows up a little bit closer with the mom side of the family, and in fact he managed to learn under 8 Sahaba. Amongst them the great Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Sayyidina Umar, the great Abdullah ibn Umar. He learns under him, he's like great-grand-uncle, and memorized the Quran. And so with this comes the love for knowledge, with this comes a love for Islam. And so now he would go and visit his relatives in Damascus. Eventually his father Abdulaziz dies when he was quite young. And even though before his father passes away, the shuyukh are tense. The sheikhs are a bit worried. How do I discipline this boy, man? He's royalty. If he comes late, what must I do? And so once Umar, he was late for salah, he wasn't coming for salah, and the sheikh was worried, what do I do? He wrote to his dad in Egypt. He said, look, Umar is not coming for salah on time, and he's very and I asked him what's going on. He said, no, my hair takes me, when I need to leave the house, it takes me long to do my hair, and that's why I'm late for salah. So his dad says, Sheikh, shave his hair off, make him bald, right? You have my full blessings to shave his hair off. And so, alhamdulillah, this kind of, look at this. The father is instilling Islamic, even though his father is with the royalty, he knows, I want better for my son. I want my son to be better than we are. And he instructed his ulama, you have full reign, you discipline him as you want. Don't treat him like a prince. He is your student. And subhanAllah, we'll see what will become of this man. Eventually, Abdulaziz passes away, and Umar is called to Damascus. His uncle Abdul Malik calls him to Damascus, says, I want you to live with my kids and my family. And they really liked him. He's that, as we said, that salih cousin. So when the cousins go out and they part, say, okay, salah time, Umar, you can lead the salah. Or they would be partying and whatever. They say, Umar, you know that about Dajjal? Tell us about Dajjal. Tell us about those things. You must know those things, right? So there was this great respect and reverence for him, but he was also part of the clan. Eventually, Abdul Malik says, I want you to marry my daughter, Fatima. So Umar marries the daughter of the Khalifa. His father-in-law is the Khalifa, and all those 4 sons would become his brother-in-laws. They're all Khalifa, so he's now part of the inner clan. He's part of the inner clan amongst the Umayyads. And they now appoint him when he's in his 20s, go back to Medina, because the people of Medina really hate us. The people of Medina and Makkah is still the center of Islamic, of course, knowledge. That's where the scholars are. And there's no love for the Umayyads. We will give you the pledge like Hassan had given. No love, we give it to you simply out of fear of fighting. We don't want to have bloodshed in Medina like Karbala and all of that. We won't go through that again. But don't expect us to be happy with you. So they obviously saw you, Umar, you are someone that people see as a type of a scholar. You go to Medina, you be the governor of Makkah, and you try to bring the people closer to us as the Umayyads. And as governor of Medina, he now of course becomes more in touch with the scholars of Medina, and he becomes more in touch with the centers of learning. As the governor of Medina, he would of course be able to engage with the remaining Sahaba, and he would be in charge of organizing the Hajj. And of course administering Makkah and Medina, where he expanded the Masjid. He expanded the first major expansion of the Masjid of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was under Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So all these things Allah had allowed him in his job to operate within that very safe environment. And he would of course then make Makkah and Medina, he would say to the Umayyads, if you want me to bring the people closer to you, you need to allow me to deal with them differently. You are very heavy-handed when it comes to Iraq and Syria and all of that. With the people of Medina and Makkah, allow me to deal with them as I want to. I will give them money, I'll deal gently. If they say things you don't like, the scholars, don't come down hard, let me deal with them. And he calls a group of scholars, subhanAllah, this is the first ruler that now understands that there's a separation between the ulama class and the ruling class. In the past, we're very fortunate. We had the greatest ulama, were also the political leadership were in one people, Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, Uthman and Ali. We didn't have that now anymore. The rulers are on a different tangent. But he wanted to honor the ulama, and he understood that our spirit of Islam is not in the hand of rulers and khalifas, it's in the hand of the ulama. That when that fire is extinguished, that's when we lose what we have. So he assembled the greatest ulama in the world, which is obviously in Medina and Makkah, and he made them a committee, like an MJC. And he says to them, rulers usually are appointed over people to watch over them. That's my job. I need to watch the people. But who's going to watch me? So I appoint you as my committee of advisors. If you see I'm out of line with the Sharia, advise me. Many of them were his teachers. Many of them were people he grew up with and he admired. Some of them even peers of his that now he saw excelled as scholars. And so he appointed a committee of ulama. He said, guide me and stop me from acting. And with this, of course, he received a great amount of love, admiration from the Ummah. The people of Medina and Mecca were now feeling, oh, not all the Umayyads are so bad. There is maybe a star that we can look at. And people started to leave the other areas, Syria, Baghdad. They left the rest of the lands to come to Medina and Mecca because they found there's a governor here who is good. And this again put him under odds with Al-Walid, the Khalifa. So now Umar must now again manage his family on the one side who are saying, you need to be hard. Our other governors are complaining, how can we be strict but you want to be lenient? And so subhanAllah, we have a letter that he wrote to Al-Walid. Again, this man Al-Walid, perhaps no Khalifa enjoyed as much authority and power like Al-Walid. From Spain to China, he ruled absolutely. No one dared speak to Al-Walid with anything. The scholars mention that with each Khalifa, his personality and his character would reflect in the people. Al-Walid was all about conquest and power, and therefore everybody was in competition with one another. Everybody wanted to outdo one another. This was Al-Walid's entire motto. So now Umar comes to Al-Walid, and he complains, and he says to Al-Walid, can I give you advice? I can speak frankly. We're cousins, but I'm also your governor. He says to him, my cousin, surely after shirk, the greatest sin in the sight of Allah is the shedding of blood. Yet your officials, your governors, your generals, they kill indiscriminately. And when they kill somebody, they simply write up a report, this was a rebel, this guy spoke out against you, and the victim is blamed for a crime, and you just watch over it. And this person did such and such. Indeed, you are responsible for this, and you will be held accountable for it. Therefore, I advise you, write to your generals, your governors, commanding them not to kill a single person, but to record their sins and to give them testimony, meaning give them a fair trial. If you're going to kill somebody, you need to do this freely. This way, your order will allow your affairs to become clear to you. So this way, at least you exonerate yourself with Allah. When he spoke about this, and he told him, you need to issue a new decree that no one is allowed to be executed, without a due process. Al-Walid said, yes, may Allah bless you and may Allah protect you from misfortune. This really hit home, and he said, I will write to them as you command. And so he wrote to his generals and his governors. They respond back and said, Umar is a problem, you need to depose of him. Al-Walid, under pressure from his governors, Al-Hajjaj, he eventually removes Umar. He says, I can't put you as governor of Medina anymore. You are removed as governor. And Umar was fine, no problem. I will continue to live as a public servant. He was, though, very close. So Al-Walid's younger brother is Sulaiman. And Sulaiman and Umar were like cousins of the same age. And they grew up kind of together. Al-Walid was a very strong, a very driven, ambitious Khalifa. Sulaiman was more of a party boy. But he was a softie. And when Al-Walid was about to die, he was considering, I don't want to put my younger brother Sulaiman as Khalifa. He doesn't have the mettle I have. And Umar once again spoke to him and said, you're going to cause a huge fitna. You're going to change the line of succession. We're going to have civil war. Just put Sulaiman there. Even though Sulaiman, as we know, may Allah have mercy on him, Sulaiman was a man that his focus was women and enjoyment. He wasn't as hard as Al-Walid was. Perhaps there were some redeeming qualities in his soft nature. And Al-Walid said, fine. And so Sulaiman becomes the Khalifa. And Sulaiman knows it was the advice of Umar bin Abdulaziz that made him the Khalifa. And so he calls Umar and he says, I want you to be my personal advisor. You will be my personal advisor. And so the first steps now is they're stopping the generals and the governors from exploiting and persecuting the people. And Umar starts speaking to Sulaiman and says, look, now you're the Khalifa, you can't party like this anymore. You need to start growing up now. You can't just be with women and all these things. You are the Khalifa. Sulaiman, make dua for me, Umar. Inshallah, I'll get there. And it's mentioned in the books of hadith or the books of history, we're not sure how true it is, that, for example, Umar says to him, you are the Khalifa, you need to lead the people on Hajj. How can you continue like this? And then he points out, he says, look at all these people on Hajj, these thousands, these millions of people. These are your subjects, they obey you. But you have to answer for all of them on the day of Qiyamah. And also these little advices slowly chips away at the Khalifa. Sulaiman, though, as Allah would decree, would not live very long. If you look at his rule, only a few years. It mentions that he was extremely beautiful. He was like a model, and he dressed in the best of clothing, and he was powerful. And once he, really had a beautiful outfit, and he says to his women, his haram of ladies, and he says, have you ever seen something more beautiful than me? He tells these beautiful ladies, have you ever seen anything more beautiful than me? A Khalifa who has so much power and all of this, and he was so amazed. He didn't say, MashaAllah. Within 1 week, he was on his deathbed. Allah had struck him with some kind of sickness. And now that he's dying, he calls his Sheikh Raja. He says, I'm going to die, Sheikh, now give me advice. What did I do with my life? And Raja says, perhaps as a redemption to you, maybe Allah will have mercy on you if you select a good successor. And there's no one better than Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. He is not in the line of succession, and you know he's the best man for the job. Why don't we do this? And this unplanned, unscheduled Raja and Sulaiman on his deathbed, he signs the letter, my successor will be Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar has no idea about this. Sulaiman dies, they perform the janazah salah, the Umayyad family gets together. They know already who should be the next brother in line for succession. This is supposed to be a done deal. Abdul Malik, many years ago, the father said, one brother after the other, that's what's going to happen. No, we don't dispute with me. I'm in charge. I'm the Sultan. They all said, yes, Daddy, will follow. Now Sulaiman breaks the chain of succession, and he appoints an outsider, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. They sit there expecting to hear the name of Hisham, I believe, and Raja opens the letter, the chief imam, and he says, it is the will and decree of Sulaiman. Do you all follow the Khalifa? Yes, we obey the Khalifa, that he has appointed Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as his successor. Umar is sitting there, and his first words are, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We continue inshallah tomorrow, bi'idhnillah. Question last night's our first announcement, orphan program. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, people are donating, but there remains still a bit of a balance. If anybody can contribute one orphan, half an orphan, if you can, inshallah, please contribute to 100 rand, 200 rand, if you can, much appreciated. We said last night's question, that hadith about Hassan, the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Hassan, this son of mine, Hassan, is a Sayyid. He's a Sayyid. That's why I say Sayyidina Hassan. May Allah, Sayyid means a leader. Because through him, Allah will bring peace between two groups of Muslims that are fighting. He is a Sayyid. Tonight's question, and okay, sorry, let's take out some answers here. Zahir Baker? No? Zahir not here. See again. Siraj Sali? Siraj, mashallah. And Fatima West, my sister. Okay, so she gets my sister. She's easier. All right, I'll give it to her. Shukran, inshallah. Tonight's question: who was Umar bin Abdul Aziz's father-in-law? Who was his father-in-law? Was his father-in-law Sulaiman, Hisham, Walid, or Abdul Malik? Who was his father-in-law? Inshallah. We continue tomorrow. Bidnillah. Sallallahu Sayyidina Muhammad wa sahbihi sallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum. To 1 with the English, and we hope to have the Salah by 1:15. So we're about 10 minutes earlier, I think, inshallah. So just a reminder, 1:15 is the Jummah Salah tomorrow.